Hey, welcome to Interview Combat. I am GM Jim, and with me here today is
Shawn from Delver.
Shawn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a YouTuber here on the platform. I only got into it really. I've been doing YouTube for years, but only successfully started into the D&D space last November, I believe. And I like to focus on a lot of the more ethereal, intangible portions of our hobby. So like kind of pulling away from like the actual rules and such. I like to do about history deep dives, talk about the overall like communication styles of the hobby and stuff like that.
Nice. I do love the deep dive stuff on your channel because anybody could talk about the rules, but actually doing the research, putting out the notes, and educating people, very fun. Anyway, this is Interview Combat, and it's an interview show, but it ain't your daddy's interview show. What we're doing here is we are going to roll contested checks against each other, D20 checks against each other. I will be rolling a flat roll. Shawn will roll with a +1 for his 1 year of YouTubing in this area. And then if I win, Shawn gets a hard question. And if he wins, he gets a soft question. We'll get through as many of these as we can. We'll go 20, 25, 30 minutes, just however it feels. And so if we are ready, I think we can have our first roll. So, Shawn, you need to beat 16.
All right, let's see. Oh,
with the 14 +1 for the 15. So close. Not good enough. All right, here's your first hard question. As a content creator, how do you handle criticism and differing opinions from viewers, especially when it comes to controversial topics within TTRPGs, aka do you read the comments?
Oh yeah, I have read pretty much every comment that has ever come through my channel except replies. Replies are difficult in the YouTube engine to track. So if you replied to something, there's a chance that I haven't seen it. But every mainstay comment I always take a look at and read. And when I first started into YouTube, I was very concerned about the idea of, my viewers having a space to voice their opinion, even if it was an opinion that was, in my opinion, wrong, or if it was one that was, controversial or not the mainstay. What it ended up turning into over time was I like people having conversations. I like people being able to discuss things that they do differ on. So I leave those comments alone. I let them grow. I let people talk about them. It's when people use derogatory language or they purposely try to insult somebody. And it's usually, if it's insulting me, I'm okay with it. But if it's insulting another person or somebody or like a group of people, I do remove those comments. I've gotten to the point now where I like to create an atmosphere around my channel where people feel safe to talk about things, but people also feel safe to kind of engage with it without being called a derogatory term. And so those are the only comments that I really take any issue with. Everything else I'm actually fairly open to, even if it's like, you suck. There was a lot of comments for a while on one of my videos, like, your camera's too close to your face. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, that's a good point. So I moved the camera back on my later videos, but I leave those ones up because those are fine.
Yeah, I started my channel with a mission of reading and replying to every single comment, and that was a mistake. It was fine when I had 300 subscribers and I would get one comment on a video. That was perfectly fine, but not scalable. Also then, I look at most of the comments. I don't see all of them, but I look at most of them. And when I was replying to every one of them, those mean comments, that would really get under my skin because I'd be like, what can I possibly say to this that's not combative? Also recognizes the person, honors them, but definitely doesn't let them get away with saying something, Yeah. I'm glad I don't do that anymore. Way too much time. All right, let's go again. Next up this time, Shawn, only a 5, which you handily beat with your 8. All right, here we go. Soft question. TTRPGs can be intimidating for newcomers. What advice do you have for people who are interested in getting into tabletop gaming but aren't sure where to start?
Ooh, that is an interesting one because there are areas of that that I kind of disagree with the majority of people on. Because one of my first experiences in D&D, like I had played it a few times with friends, but I was still looking for something more. I ended up trying to look for an online group. And I know this isn't the case with everybody, but this online group didn't do well. It was very restrictive. It was almost West Marchy style. And it was the early days of like 5e. So I was turned off to the idea immediately by kind of joining a group like that. But I think you're going to find that anywhere. I think one of the big things that you could do is online looking for a game. Just try to really find a DM that really suits your style, or a player group that really fits with what you're looking for. But I think one of the other things is, if you have friends, try launching off of your own friend group. Either try to convince one of your friends that's really creative to be the dungeon master, or yourself be the dungeon master. And what I've come to find out is the more time you spend kind of in the early stages playing D&D with your friends, eventually one of your friends is going to really like it, or they're going to introduce someone else that really likes it, and then all of a sudden you're going to have somebody inviting you to a campaign, and then you get to engage with it in that way. So it's very what's the word? It's it's a weird word. It's incestual. You're constantly growing from like the mass of friends that you're putting into it, to the point now where I play with people that for the most part I didn't really know before we started playing D&D. And so they're not like, they are people that have turned from D&D friends into friends rather than friends into D&D friends. So it's just kind of cyclical. It kind of goes along the line. So my biggest suggestion in that field is just convince your friends to play. I'm sure that your friends want to, and if they don't, then you'll know after one session.
The nice thing about this being 2024 is you don't have to explain to people what D&D is nearly as much as you did 20 years ago. Thanks to Stranger Things and the popularity of 5e and Critical Role and all that, now most people at least have an inkling of what Dungeons and Dragons is. A lot of them are wrong about how the game actually works, but it's different, very different than imagine it being 1984 and you're like, okay, we're going to play this make-believe game, right? It's make-believe, but it's not for little kids. Now, it must have been way harder to explain the concept of tater pigs 50 years ago.
I've had to explain what D&D is many times throughout because this is my last semester of university. And a lot of my research and papers that I've done throughout my courses have been about D&D, because my degree is in communication studies. So it fits perfectly together. And literally just yesterday, I had to speak with one of my professors that I'm working on a rhetorical criticism paper with. And he was like, the first thing I said, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm covering this company's response to this thing called the OGL. And his first response was, is that like a video game thing? Like, I looked it up and I was like, you're not off, but you're not right. And I was like, I got some time. Do you want, let me tell you what D&D is. And like having to explain this thing to people that have just no idea what this might even be.
Copy that. This has nothing to do with the interview, but what are those wispy things on the map behind you?
Oh, those are little skulls with like kind of tapestry. We've already decorated for Halloween. So
oh, you're Halloweening already. Okay. Yeah. It's early.
My partner and I have an agreement. She puts up Halloween decorations on September 1st, which allows me to put up Christmas decorations on November 1st. So little give and take.
Does that also mean pumpkin spice is allowed starting on September 1?
Oh, pumpkin spice was allowed starting July. I love pumpkin spice. I look for it everywhere, and nowhere has it right now. And I'm like, please let me have the pumpkin spice.
Fair enough. All right, let's go again. Round number 3. You need to beat only a 6.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I rolled 2.
Well, let's see. One's a D12.
Yeah,
so won't count that. You were rolling with Bardic Inspiration for some reason, Shawn, which I don't think so. Nobody said anything about Bardic here.
Yeah, it's a big number.
But you beat me anyway. So, how did you get into YouTubing?
So I, as I said, I've been doing YouTube for years. When I started out in it, it was Club Penguin Star Wars videos, which is the wildest intro to any of this. But as I got through high school, I actually started in our media department at my high school. Won a few contests. I actually had one of my commercials that we made for one of our local airline or airports. It was on the screen at movie theaters for a month. And so I kind of got into it through that way. Eventually, I got into actual production with commercials with the art department, stuff like that. And then when I came up to my university, I started out in photojournalism with the kind of heavy focus in video. I worked for our university newspaper as the director of multimedia and the director of photography. So I was doing a lot of production work. I eventually left that, changed my major back to communication studies because it's what I was more interested in anyway. And as I've kind of like settled into around this, YouTube to me is something that I do as like a side hobby. I just wanted to talk about D&D. I was particularly inspired by some of my classes and some of the ideas that we talked about in them. And I was like, oh, they directly relate to how we play Dungeons and Dragons. Let me make a video about that. One of those videos got pretty popular. It's no longer available because it was only like 1,000 views, but I enjoyed it, but I was like, I could do better. So I started focusing a little bit more on it. And then over the course of the last few months, I've just been kind of growing the brand, growing the types of videos I do, and spreading my wings a little bit.
Spread your wings. You know, in terms of toxicity in fandoms, I think you have TTRPGs, video games, and Star Wars is at the very top of fandom toxicity. So if you were involved in any kind of Star Wars commentating, then my heart goes out to you for everything. I mean, I said something about Star Wars Acolyte in a social media post like 2 weeks ago. You know, the show's been off the air for months, but I just tossed out something and it was like, it was on Threads, which it tells you how many views you get. It was like on a day, it was like, your thread got 1,000 views. I was like, why? Why does anyone care what my thoughts on Star Wars Acolyte are? Why should anyone care? But anyway.
Star Wars fans are ravenous.
Star Wars fans are the worst.
I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've read like a bunch of the expanded universe books, but I've gotten to the point now, like, as you said, like I just don't engage with the material at all or even the fandom because I see a lot of toxicity coming in from whatever opinion you have. And I'm like, I'm just going to sit over here. I'm going to just chill out and watch from the sideline.
Yeah, it's a shame. The internet has birthed many great innovations, but accelerating the course of toxicity has also been one thing that the internet has given us that's not so great. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that, though. We're here to roll some dice. So our next question, and you need to beat, 17, and meets it, beats it. So we're going to say the tie goes to the guest. All right, your next soft question. What makes a good tabletop GM?
I think, that's actually a really good question. What makes a good tabletop GM? I think the best thing about what makes the best tabletop GMs is the ability to let it go. The ability to not get caught up in the specifics and kind of allow yourself to go with the flow. The big thing that I think about in this is when I talked about this on another interview show, where when you enter into the first session as a dungeon master, you do the dumbest voice you can. Because the moment you do the dumbest voice you can, everyone else feels more comfortable trying their dumb voices because they're going to go, oh, I'm not going to be that bad. And just kind of allowing yourself to have that embarrassing moment. Or if, your player wants to try this thing that you didn't consider it. And the biggest one, a dungeon master who doesn't need to develop their entire world but to get started. Just develop an adventure, a town, start from there and grow from there. And I think that's the thing that kills a lot of creative people that want to get into D&D. They just get caught up in the idea of like, it needs to be perfect, it needs to be finished, and then that just burns them out incredibly quickly. I have friends now that are kind of getting to that stage where they're ready to run, and it's been a few years. And I look at like some of my campaigns and I'm like, oh, I thought of that, 2 days before I ran it, and I thought it would be fun, so I went with it. I think just that ability, that spontaneity, that ability to kind of go with the motions and just wing it. I think that's the biggest thing that kind of helps a DM.
One thing that I tell new game masters is that when you're prepping, when you're building your world or building your town or whatever, you're probably going to have the thought that goes, well, I should know what the name of the next town over is in case the players ask. And I should know what the name of the town next to that is in case they ask. And they're probably not going to ask. You probably don't need to know what the name of the town 2 towns over is called. Because that was me. That was my brain when I started. I was like, I need to know everything. I need to be the master of this world so I can be prepared for any possible eventuality. And if your players ask you a random question, it's going to be something that you didn't prepare for no matter what you do. So so there's no reason to prepare 1,000 hours for a session because something's going to happen you didn't prepare for no matter how well you think you are prepared. That's just how tabletop games work.
And I think it's very much like the writer mentality of like, you see like Brandon Sanderson, you see George R.R. Martin, internal wikis, internal consistency. The idea that they need to have everything perfect, which is why I always find it interesting. I don't think there's a lot of overlap between creative writers and Dungeons and Dragons players. I think that there is overlap, but what I always like imagine is somebody who has to have all the answers in one hand and somebody who enjoys telling stories and like kind of creating a character in the other. There is overlap between those two groups, but I think that they are two intrinsically different groups. But it's one of my friends had a creative writing class this semester, and he was like, yeah, there was like 20 people. They asked if anyone played D&D. Only me and one other person raised their hand. And I'm like, yeah, I could imagine that. I think writing is a very personal thing, and I don't think that it's always a one-to-one just because it is fantasy.
Why did they ask if anyone plays D&D? Where did that come from?
I'm not sure. It's probably just somebody mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe that's what got them into wanting to take a creative writing class. I know Brandon Sanderson, the writer of the Stormlight Archive, Mistborn, all that. He teaches a class at Brigham Young University for creative writing, specifically sci-fi fantasy. And he has his lectures up online, so you can go and watch them and learn from him directly. And in it, he talks about how a lot of people take that class for Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that there's more of an interest in DMs going into learning how to write rather than writers learning how to go into D&D.
Yeah, I have seen a full semester of Brandon Sanderson's class. This was like a decade ago. It was on a website, The Dragon something. I don't remember now. But yeah, it wasn't. I think he put later semesters up on YouTube, but this was something. He had let his friend record the first time he taught the class and then put that online, but it wasn't on YouTube, and I saw it somewhere else. Anyway, none of that's important. None of that matters. That's all side information. Let's roll some dice. Right, here we go. You need to beat a 9. And your 16 beats my 9. So here, do you have a favorite tabletop monster?
I think if you ask my players, they'll say dragons. I really like dragons. I like the idea of a very powerful creature that collects knowledge, collects loot, collects people. Very mastermind level thinking, and I grew up on a lot of classic dragon stories. So Smaug from The Hobbit, Fafnir from Sigurd the Volsung, and I really enjoy that level of, I don't know, villainy, or even sometimes not villainy, just good-hearted kindness. And putting them up against a creature like that is always really, really fun. I'm just a huge fan. I mean, it's in the name, Dungeons and Dragons. I really liked dragons overall, I'd say.
They are very interesting creatures. There's so much you can do with them, especially once you get to Is it only ancient dragons that can shapeshift? Maybe adult dragons, some of them, I don't know. But once you get to the shape-shifting dragons and then you're in a city and anyone can be a dragon, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. All right, we got time for one or two more. Let's roll some dice. Come on, nat 20. Nope, that is an 11.
I'm kind of hoping for a hard question. Could I choose a hard question?
You can, and this has happened before on this interview show where the guest feels bad for rolling higher than me.
Well, I don't feel bad. I love it, but I love the hard hitting ones. Give me
Sure.
the hardest question.
The hardest question. Oh man. Okay. I don't know if this is the hardest one, but this one definitely makes guests sigh when I ask. Some TTRPGs have faced backlash for their portrayal of sensitive topics like mental health, trauma, and violence. How do you strike a balance between addressing these themes and providing engaging content?
Oh, that's really cool. Okay.
Yeah.
There are TTRPGs, games, and systems alike that do include themes that I think not everybody is into. And what I've always my opinion has always been on that it doesn't need to be for everyone. It needs to be for the people that want that. And if it's not something that I want, then it's not something that I want. So long as it isn't like encouraging malicious behavior in people, that I think it is fine to follow those kind of themes and see what's up. When it comes to how I strike that balance of using them in my game, I usually leave it up to my players to kind of introduce stuff like that. I've had players who play characters with schizophrenia because they, as people, have schizophrenia, and allowing them to explore those different types of themselves or those different aspects of themselves. I don't really add a lot of mental health issues into my world specifically, not from a lack of, or not from like trying to avoid it. More so, it's not something that I normally consider because it's not something that I have myself. I think that all of my characters probably have ADHD because that is my neurodivergent disorder that I do have. And yeah, I allow it to be a little more free flowing because I think when it comes down to it, if you are somebody who lives with a trauma or a neurodivergent a disorder or something like that, you're living with it constantly. So you're okay with the themes that kind of surround it, unless it is something that is poignant, it is something that is malicious, or it is something that can send you into a spiral. So I think I usually leave it up to my players to kind of strike that balance for themselves, and then I go along with it. But that's why, like, before we start any campaign, we talk about like what our do's and don'ts are. It actually helped me last session. I was going to introduce it was like a family of, I want to say like raccoons or like dogs or something that was injured in a battle. And when I was going the dog route, I remembered that one of my players had talked about how they don't like harm to domesticated animals, and I was like, oh, actually, never mind, I'm gonna rewind the clock on that. And then they messaged me and they were like, hey, thanks, by the way, that was I didn't want. And I was like, totally fine, I completely forgot about that, I'm sorry you even got that far. So as I say, like, I leave it up to my players to kind of determine the level of controversy, I guess is a good word for it, that is introduced to the campaign.
Yeah, I'm not cool with harm to domesticated animals either. So yeah, it's always great when you have a dungeon master who is willing to listen to what the players are asking for. The TTRPG called Thirsty Sword Lesbians has a really interesting session 0 like worksheet. I don't remember all the parts of it, but I remember like the you said do's and don'ts in Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I think they describe it. There's a section that says what I'm most excited for in this campaign. And there's another section that's the opposite of that. It's like what I don't want to see in this campaign. And I like that idea of the most excited for, because I'm going to write down things like epic battles and heroic moments. I'm going to write down all the things that I want. High combat, medium roleplay, low traps, because traps are bogus. My opinion, only my opinion. But yeah, any way you can collect that information and check in from time to time, because you can have a session 0 at the beginning of your 16th session, and that
Hmm.
session 0 can be a check-in that lasts for 10 minutes. That's still a session 0. It's still a check-in. It's still, how's everybody going? How are our PC's goals? That's one thing you can toss into a session 0 that doesn't make it feel like you're in a lecture by HR at your office. Like, what's your character's goal? How does that play into the party's goals? How's everybody going to work together on those goals? That's the kind of stuff you can talk about in a session 0, right alongside with no spiders, no kicking the dog, etc. All the things that people don't want to see. I think we're about out of time. I was thinking about maybe one more question, but I think we're pushing up against that 30-minute mark. So, you know what? I think it was a fair fight, and I believe you have come out victorious.
Let's go.
And, Shawn, why don't you tell the people all the places they can find you online?
Yeah, the primary one is YouTube. You do at the Delver, or you look up Delver, or you can look up my video about Critical Role. That one popped off a few months ago. It's that's where you can find me. I have a Twitter now. I don't like Twitter. I don't like using Twitter, but I need it for one of my courses. So I'm not going to post anything, I don't believe. So if you want to follow that, feel free to. But yeah, it's just YouTube. I like to keep my presence around the Delver community pretty limited. So that's pretty much it.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and thank you for watching. Really appreciate you. I've got a bunch more of these with a bunch of people just as cool, maybe even cooler than Shawn. I don't know.
Whoa, we'll slow down.
We'll say on par. That's
There
fair.
we go. Okay.
Everyone I interview is the exact same coolness level. And that's why I do it. All right. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.